Every clock on your wrist, in your pocket, was designed by a civilization that colonized our civilization.
The clock has almost been weaponized. You are on the clock from the moment you wake up. Taking a break to pray is considered a waste of time. To erect these massive tower clocks. This is now how you organize time. This is how you become civilized. We've taken a factory system and made that how we organize our days.
And there may be some cynics who say we're scientifically, industrially backward. Malls and shopping centers don't have clocks because they want people to maximize their time spending.
The slave has no choice. Slave reports to the master. I'm owned by Allah.
It's not just tyranny of time, it's the tyranny of your mobile phone.
This week on The Thinking Muslim, Mohammed Faris joins us to discuss the hustle culture and how we all need to recalibrate how we view productivity and success.
We're here at the Prophetic Strategy Summit here in Istanbul. And we have the honor today to have having Mohammed Faris, author of The Barakah Effect, a book that looks at productivity, time, and of course, the concept of barakah in Islam. Mohammed Faris, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and welcome to The Thinking Muslim.
Wa alaikum assalam. Thank you so much. Honored to be here. Alhamdulillah.
Well, it's really wonderful to have you with us. And I've actually been meaning to speak to you for many years, actually. It's been, subhanAllah, I think we met in Doha a few months back now, and alhamdulillah, we've managed to meet once again here in Istanbul. So it's a long time coming. I've got so many questions for you.
Bismillah.
And Jazakallah khair for all that you do, and I've heard so many good reviews about your book, inshallah. So today we're going to talk about time, barakah, productivity, how we as Muslims view that. We live in a capitalist world. All around us on YouTube and social media, around us we see coaches that tell us that time means money, and that we've got to be productive, we've got to wake up at 4 a.m. and we've got to exercise and have earned our first million by the time we get to 21 years old. So there's a lot out there, a lot of stimulus that tells us, that's asking us, that's pushing us to live in a particular kind of way. And I must say, and forgive me for this, but when I first heard that, we've got a Muslim productivity coach, I thought, oh, subhanAllah, it's just another person, who's going to add on some productivity over what is effectively a capitalist framework. And it took me some time to realize that, mashallah, what you have and what you produce is actually completely different. So I want to explore your ideas today. Let's start with the clock. Every clock on your wrist, in your pocket, was designed by civilization that colonized our civilization. Now, does that sound like a paranoid view, or is that accurate in your mind?
Okay, all right. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. If you think about every civilization that's comes with a worldview on how to organize your time. And that worldview is usually based on what's important for that civilization. For example, the Islamic civilization was very clear that the whole point is how we organize our time to fulfill our purpose in life is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why one of the verses in the Quran talks about salah being a prescribed time. And we should orient ourselves towards worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to organize our day around that sense of around that worship. When the current civilization, Western civilization, is about economic output. It's about capitalism. It's about how can I extract from how much resource can I extract resource from this time. So that worldview then dictates how we organize ourselves. And one of the interesting things is that when the clock was invented, it was actually interesting that the clock started off in monasteries for the monks to tell the time for prayers. But over time, it slowly drifted to the merchants and then to the Puritan forces, then to Benjamin Franklin's, all that stuff, where the discussion was more about how can we make the most use of time for economic output. And now the clock has almost been weaponized, where you are on the clock from the moment you wake up, and it's a waste of time to do anything other than doing something for economic output. For example, taking a break to pray is considered a waste of time. Spending quality time with your parent is considered a waste of time. Attending a funeral is considered a waste of time because it's about work. If you're not working, then you're wasting your time. And I think that worldview that came packaged in the clock was really exemplified whenever, for example, the British entered a new town. One of the first things they would do, they would erect these massive tower clocks almost tell people like, this is now how you organize time. This is modernity. This is how you become civilized. And that backward stuff, the minarat and adhan, no, that's not precise. That's not accurate. And we lost something along the way. And we're now so ingrained that it almost becomes, we think it's impossible to think of any other way to organize our time. And one of the things that I challenge people is, can you imagine living beyond the clock? Can you imagine being more present? And what does a clock do to our spirituality? What does a clock do to our relationships? What does a clock do to our health? For example, think about when you walk in the masjid, you see a massive clock with a countdown timer. And it's almost like, I joke, like it's almost like, the time before Iqamah is like we're launching a rocket, like 10, 9, 8, 7, everyone starts getting up. And then if the Imam is late, we get stressed and upset with them. But if you look at more traditional masajids, you see people sit and they wait for the Imam. And they use that time to make dua and adhkar, and then when the Imam shows up, they shows up. But that sounds inefficient. That sounds that it's not the best use of your time. Think about your family. I'm guilty of this. Like, oh, come on, we're late, let's go. And you get in the car, you're all huffing and puffing, and you're upset with each other because, we're late. But then you're like, are we really late? And yes, if you're trying to catch a flight, a train, I understand. But if it's going to be about, we're going out for an outing, we're going to meet some people, why are we create this time pressure? Almost like psychological time pressure. And now from a health perspective, there's something called time anxiety. People have the same reaction to to being late as if they're being attacked by somebody. So it's a question for us to think about the clock. There's nothing wrong using a clock. It's a useful tool. We'll not be able to organize this podcast without referring to its specific time. But when it dictates, when we start organizing ourselves around the clock for the purpose of economic output or for the purpose of worshiping Allah, and that's where we need to kind of differentiate, inshallah.
That's really interesting. So let's go back to that example of the masjid. Often I've got that countdown timer in my masjid. It's in digital, it's a very big TV, it's a plasma screen, and it tells me that Iqamah is coming up, and it tells me that I've got 15 minutes or whatever left to the actual Jama'ah prayer. And so, yes, we're looking at that clock and we're intently thinking about, okay, when is it that we're going to be able to pray? Your point, I suppose, is that pressure that is induced by time is taking something away from us.
Yes.
What is it exactly taking away from us?
It's taking the idea of being present. So I'll use these examples, analogy. If you were being invited to the Prime Minister's home or to a king's palace, it'd be very rude to be checking your clock every 5 seconds, like, I gotta go, right? Yeah. There's something there about the adab of being in the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that is lost when we're always checking the clock and think, okay, we need to just be done with it. Not just before the salah, but even after salah. Like, think about it. As soon as you finish salah, the first thing you do is you look at the clock. Oh, I gotta go. But if you don't have the clocks in front of you, if you don't have your watch on you, if you don't have your phone on you, you can just stay there, make some dua, and you are in Allah's house. In those few moments that, from the hustle and bustle of life, take that time to remember Him, to be there. And we kind of lose that. We made salah as a thing on a to-do list. I gotta go, pray, I'm out. In and out, versus being a place we're experiencing salah. So this impatience we have with our rituals, this impatience we have with our leaders. I mean, I feel sorry for the imams who are put on the clock, and to the point that the congregation gets upset with them. And some of them, they're like genuinely trying to make it, and if they don't make it on time, there's a whole hoo-ha. But if the clock was not there, and again, I'm not saying people think, oh, this is a call for us to just not use our time wisely, but there's something about you entering a sacred place. You're entering a place where you can worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Take that time, spend that time. And one of the easiest things to do is to remove the watches, remove your phones, remove the clock, and just experience being there. And you'd be amazed sometimes that actually what you think is half an hour is actually 20 minutes. But time, talk about barakah, one of the ways of experiencing barakah is by detaching yourself from the clock. I've actually noticed it. I stopped wearing watches because I feel like I'm more in the moment, I'm more present, and I feel time slows down versus I feel that tick, always like I gotta go be somewhere. I'm not being productive or efficient.
So where does that balance out with being careless with other people's time? I'm a stickler for time sometimes. Obviously sometimes I'm late to things as well. But often when when someone's late, I always feel that, okay, you're careless with my time. We've agreed to meet at such and such time. You're half an hour late, and that's affected my life. Right?
Yes.
So where does that attitude towards time end, and fall into negligence and towards your brother or your sister?
Great question. So there's two things here. Number one, every society, every culture has what's called a time orientation. There's a great book by Edward Hill on the silent language. He's an anthropologist, and he was saying that some cultures are known as the monochronic cultures, where they look at time as linear. And I got to schedule things, and I have to make sure things are done on time, and they value punctuality and efficiency over relationships, right? And then there's the polychronic cultures.
Yeah.
Usually they are the Middle East, Africa, Latin America, where time is cyclical, time is fluid. I value my relationship over being on time. So for example, let's say I'm coming to meet you, and I bump into my friend. I will have a nice half an hour chat with that person because I value being present, and I'll be late to meeting you.
And I'll be really angry, and I'll be cursing you for coming late.
And I'll be totally chill, like, why are you upset? Why upset? And if anyone's done business in the Middle East or Africa, Latin America, will tell you, like, it's like, what's wrong? So for me, it's like, number one, that there is this orientation of time. And the question is it right or wrong? Right? Right now, we're judging everything according to the kind of Eurocentric worldview, that if you're not monochronic, that means you're inefficient. That means you're uncivilized. That means you don't respect time. We joke about the Muslim standard time. But I'm like, is that actually a call for almost a way to demonize Muslims, to show how backward we are? Versus saying, there's something we value more. If I'm coming to see you, but I have my mother calls me. My mother asked me to do something more important than me perhaps meeting my appointment. The question is, well, how do I deal with that? So when I tell people this, people get really uncomfortable. Are you saying Muslims should be late or not punctual? And listen, I want to separate between you making a promise. For example, I promised Mohammed Jalal, I'll meet you at this time. That's a promise. And I fulfilled that promise. And we use the clock as a way to fulfill that promise. I could have just said, we'll meet you after Dhuhr, meet you after Maghrib. I could have used any measure of time, but that's a promise. And for me to be late is I'm breaking that promise. Versus pacing ourselves and always saying the clock overrules everything else to the point where we're willing to hurt people along the way. There's that famous experiment done where, I think the Good Samaritan, where they took university students and they taught them to give a speech about the Good Samaritan. And then someone comes and goes, oh, you're late, you have to go and quickly go give the speech across the road. And along the way, there was somebody on the floor saying, please help me, I need your help. And of course, the story of the Good Samaritan is the story of helping a stranger. And these people overstep that person, ignore that person because, oh, I'm late, and forget that there's somebody there. I always say this, and it's really sad when sometimes we are so clock driven that when Allah places opportunities in front of you for earn reward, we ignore that in the name of the clock. For example, you're attending Dhuhr prayer and you see a janazah. You think, man, I've got meetings, I've got things to do, but technically I could go for this janazah. And it's not a huge opportunity for reward. You're getting 2 mountains of reward, as Prophet Muhammad ﷺ taught us. I'm like, but because of the clock, we're like, well, that's not the best use of my time, I'm gonna go somewhere else. Or here somebody's sick. You're like, oh no, I gotta take time off my schedule, but then but that person, these are opportunities Allah is sending to you. And because we're so clock driven, we don't make most of those opportunities. And I feel like we're losing something along the way. So I'm not saying be polychronic or monochronic or which culture is good or bad. But I'm saying is, as Muslims, we always orient ourselves, what is most pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala now? In this moment is a salah time, that is the most pleasing to Him in this moment. So I go and pray. Is it spending time with my mother? Is it going visiting the sick? Is it doing my work? Is it fulfilling a promise I made and being on time for something? When we're thinking from that perspective, then that kind of solves this dichotomy of how to ensure I'm not always late, but at the same time, I be present and not just be completely taken over by the clock.
Mohammed Faris, many a time in my interviews, I see the interview as a puzzle, and I'm trying to fit this puzzle together. And the puzzle at the moment in my mind is, but Mohammed Faris is a productivity coach. So how does this all fit in? Because you're basically, it seems to me, you're telling us to be maybe less productive than we should be. We're spending time at the janazah, we're going to the mosque, and we're leaving our clocks at home. Subhanallah, it's a risky way of living, right? And it goes against the capitalist ethos that we've all been inevitably, we've innately or explicitly, we've developed around this capitalist culture where time. So I remember actually a few years back, I was buying, I don't know, a ceramic plate from an old man in a Turkish store. And I think at one point I was haggling with him, and as you do as a Westerner does, right? And at one point I said, okay, my tactic was, when do you close? And he looked at me and he said, for you Westerners, time is money. For me, time is time.
Wow.
And it was a profound moment, actually, because I realized that, and I just bought it. I forgot to haggle him. That was a great pitch from him, actually. But I just wonder, I just wonder, where does the productivity then fit into this conversation?
Love it. So we almost have to redefine productivity. It's funny, when I started productiveness.com, initially I was seeped, as everyone else, in what I call the hustle culture model of productivity, where it's very ego-driven, very worldly focused, very material results. And I said, well, let's go to first principles. How do we redefine productivity? Currently, productivity means output over input, right? So the more output I produce for the amount of input could be time, could be money, then I'm being productive.
Right.
And that's more the factory definition, industrial definition of productivity.
So it's a conveyor belt.
Exactly. How can I extract more?
Right.
And to the point where now we hear about Amazon warehouse employees where they have no bathroom breaks because every second counts.
Yeah.
And that, I felt like that's not human. So we need almost a different definition of productivity. Almost we have to rethink productivity. I said, okay, well, how do you redefine productivity? Well, the definition I used in the book was, productivity is how you manage your energy, your focus, and your time to be the best abd of Allah, to fulfill your purpose in life, to worship Allah. Now, when you set that as the foundation, now I'm thinking, okay, how do I manage energy, focus, and time? So from the moment I wake up in the morning, I'm thinking about, okay, as a slave of God, what's the first thing I should be thinking about? Oh, first of all, thank Him that I woke up. Alhamdulillah, dahyana, being present. And then make wudu, and then I pray, and then I do adhkar, and then I do Quran. And it all sounds like, what is unproductive, where you should be checking your emails and going out and check the Wall Street Journal. Like, no, that's the first thing you do because you're a slave of God. And then, okay, bismillah, you go to work, you seek your rizq, fine. And in work, you hear the adhan for dhuhr, you take a break, you go and pray. So productivity is now defined on how do I become the best slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala across my roles, as an employee, as a family person, as a homemaker, as a student. And when you start thinking from that perspective, you become a bit relaxed. It takes away that tension from that day, and also become more present and not become very, we call again, the hustle culture driven. I always tell people that I hate the term work-life balance, because people think, oh, there's work and there's life, as if work is not part of life.
Right.
The prophetic approach and the Prophet Muhammad taught us is haqq balance. Give each one its haqq. Your body has a right upon you. Your Lord has a right upon you. Your spouse has a right upon you. Your guests have a right upon you. أعطي كل ذي حق حقه. Give each one the due right. Now, when you start approaching life that way, it's a much more meaningful. It's not about work almost becoming, there's a term called workism, where work has become the centerpiece of identity, the organizing principles of our life, and basically how we drive meaning and purpose in life. And if we don't have work, we feel like, well, who are we? Well, Islam answers that you are a slave of God. You're abd of Allah first, and then you're an employee, and then you're a family man. So if you are abd of Allah first, organize yourself as a slave of God. And I think sometimes we take this term, I use the word slave instead of servant. People feel uncomfortable. And I said, the reason why I use slave, not servant, because a slave has no choice. A slave reports to a master. And for me, the moment I wake up, what does my master want from me? A servant means I can go serve, I can take holidays, but a slave means I'm owned by Allah. So He owns my energy, He owns my focus, He owns my time. And that means I need to organize ourselves. But we feel very uncomfortable about this because it goes against modernity. It goes against being, how we're trained from a very young age on how to organize ourselves in our time, especially.
For 300 students in Gaza, the journey to graduation was marked by obstacles, but through your compassion, it was also paved with hope. Baitulmaal established the Hope School in Gaza in 2024 as a temporary school, and it has since become one of the premier academic institutions backed by UNICEF, and the Ministry of Education in Palestine. Over 2,000 children, many of whom are orphans, now receive a high-quality education at the Hope School, fully supported by donors like you. Support the Hope School in Gaza. Give today.
Please visit btml.us/thinkingmuslim to donate now.
Very interesting. Again, just another anecdote. While you're talking, I'm thinking of my life. I was in Palestine many years ago, and I was visiting a friend of mine who's a British person, a convert actually, who, mashallah, became Muslim and then married a Palestinian and went to live in Palestine. And I remember we were walking around the neighborhood, and we had to get somewhere. We had an appointment to get to. And every person stopped him in the street, and he would ask about his health, and they would make dua for one another. And this happened. He went to the greengrocers, and again the same thing. He went to the pharmacy, and again the same thing. They were talking to one another, and it was very nice and polite. And at one point I said, but we have to get to this appointment. And for him, it was just a natural way to live. And I just wondered to myself, have I lost something from my forefathers? I mean, I don't believe my grandfather would have lived like this. Has the West stripped something away from my humanity in the way I deal with people? And your point there is relationships mean a lot.
Yes.
How does that link into the concept of barakah that you talk about?
Yeah, so I would say barakah is a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that can enter into anything, your time, your relationships, your projects, your podcast, anything.
Yeah.
And it creates this, I call it a Barakah Effect, which could be goodness, stability, continuity, lasting impact. And the way we get barakah is we need to align ourselves with the giver of barakah. So when I get up in the morning, the first thing I do is I pray Fajr. That's the way I'm attracting barakah in my life.
Yeah.
I'm asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to put barakah. It might be more efficient for me to go and start working and check my emails.
Yeah.
But if I want barakah in my day, I start with salah. If I want barakah in my day, I read Quran. If I want barakah in my day, I spend quality time with my parents. And I think sometimes we've lost that. We feel like, it logically, this is what barakah is experiential, and it's hard to put logic around it. So imagine now if I go and say, well, it might seem inefficient, right? Or it might seem that it's a waste of time to do these spiritual, relationships or activity, but they bring barakah, right? If you ask someone, making dua for them, visiting the sick, taking it, these are all things we encourage to do. But again, if you haven't made a promise, for example, okay, fine, fulfill the promise, but don't lose the barakah of the moment. And here's a funny thing that I've personally found. Sometimes when you align yourself, you might think logically, maybe I need 3 hours to do something. And if I read the Quran, if I do this, I'll only have like an hour and a half. And you kind of stress about that. You're like, I don't know how I'm going to do it. But subhanAllah, every single time, either that thing goes away, the thing I had to work on goes away, and actually pretty enough to do it today. Or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts barakah in that moment where I get so much done compared to what I thought I'd be able to get done. Or it just gets reoriented in a different way. And I think that barakah effect, which the spiritual, I call this the missing soul of productivity.
Right.
We talk about being efficient, managing your time, your calendar, but there's a missing soul. And as Muslims, we should be, this is our heritage. This is where we hear about these scholars who wrote volumes in their lifetime. And you're thinking, logically, if you add up all the hours they were awake and how many pages they wrote per day, it does not make logical sense how much they wrote.
Right.
But the barakah in their time, where to get that barakah from? And you see them spending time in tahajjud and spending time in adhkar and Quran. They're not always writing.
Yeah.
So there's something there we've missed when we said that being productive is only about, time blocks, trying to be in control. And this is maybe the part that people struggle with. Being productive from an Islam worldview is letting go. I call it the gardener mindset, where the idea that you plant a seed, let's say try and write a book, you plant a seed, you work hard, but you cannot guarantee the outcome, at least according to your own time. But again, from a productive perspective, a hustle perspective, no, you have to be like a carpenter. I got to make sure I got to get this done. But this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, in Surah Al-Waqi'ah says, أَفَرَأَيْتُمْ مَا تَحْرُثُونَ. Do you see that seed which you sow? أَأَنْتُمْ تَزْرَعُونَهُ أَمْ نَحْنُ الزَّارِعُونَ. Is it you who makes it grow? Is it you who brings the fruits of your labor? Or is it Allah who brings the fruits of your labor? And when you live that life where I know, yes, I work hard. Yes, I tie my camel. Yes, I put the plant of seed. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who brings the result. It's a different way of being productive that is much more meaningful, spiritual, peaceful, And honestly, the impact and the barakah you feel in your life and in your work is way more than the kind of the hustle culture model that we are taught everywhere else.
That's fascinating. I mean, it seems to me that even in capitalist culture, there are some spaces where there is an absence of a clock. I think you write about this. Yeah. Malls and shopping centers don't have clocks because they want people to maximize their time spending.
Yes.
Whereas masjids today do have clocks. In Mecca, if you go to Mecca, you've got a clock tower. What does that tell us about sort of how we've almost inverted the psychology of sacred spaces versus, spaces for material, for consumerism?
Yeah, and then again, the idea there is that if you don't have a clock in a mall, you would just not be aware of the time. And we notice most malls are covered malls. You can't even see the sunlight sometimes.
Oh, wow.
Right? They're all covered. And
do you think that's on purpose?
I'm sure someone architect was thinking, okay, what's the purpose of a mall? It's for you to spend as much time so you spend as much money. Yeah. Well, how to make sure they do that? Well, the first thing we do, make it bright, make it loud, so you don't feel sleepy. Yeah. And we make sure we can remove all the clocks and you don't feel the time spending. Yeah. And whether that's by design or how it works, but it is quite suspicious about it. Yeah. And with our masajids, especially our modern masajid, and again, right now in Turkey, if you notice the traditional masajid here, you don't see a clock in the front. You'll see dimly light. For example, one of my biggest issue about circadian health. Yeah. Why do we have bright lights in the masjid? I go for Isha and I'm so sleepy. Yeah. But then I enter for 10, 15 minutes, I'm wired up because the bright light, loud adhan sound, loud, the microphone. Our modern masajid, we haven't thought through that. We haven't thought through how do we spiritually design our sacred spaces to maximize the barakah, to maximize the presence. And I think traditional masajids, whether you go to West Africa, Turkey, other places in the world, they understood that. Yeah. Understood that. And I think we're missing something there. And maybe again, perhaps I'm looking for Muslim architects who can start to think about biohealth. Start thinking about how do we design masajids that are, allowing circadian health, that are, allow you to spend quality time so you don't feel like you have to rush off. But those things hardly come in the conversation whenever we're building masajids, which we need to think about.
So you spoke earlier about hustle culture and how that's in opposition to barakah culture. Many young people, in fact all of us, we were inundated with tutorials and coaches on the internet, on YouTube, telling us to wake up at 4 o'clock, to exercise and then to get into work. And by 8 o'clock, we've effectively done the most productive work in our lives. I noticed earlier on, you didn't say that's a problem. You've just replaced that with Fajr and Ibadat, right? Is there a virtue from an Islamic perspective to waking up early as opposed to sort of lying in and waking up late?
It was funny when one of the first times I made that connection between spirituality and productivity was when I came across the hadith of Muhammad that says, "Burika li ummati fi bukuriha." There's barakah in my ummah in the early hours. And I was like, wait a second. Every productivity guru I'm reading says, wake up early, the miracle morning, the 5 a.m. club. And even they say, we don't know why. We don't know why. And subhanAllah, that's the barakah factor. Yeah. And I felt like that was, and for me what's fascinating about the hadith is the narrator of the hadith. His name is Sakhr al-Ghamidi. Imam Bukhari, when he put this hadith, says Sakhr al-Ghamidi was a man of business, was a man of trade. Really? And he started to send his trade early in the morning and became very wealthy as a result. And I'm thinking, Sakhr was this businessman. He was smart. He heard his hadith. He goes, well, the Prophet made dua for the early hours. That means I should tap into the early hours for my business, right? So I pay Fajr and I send my trade early in the morning, and as a result, he became wealthy. In recent times, I met in Tanzania, there was a businessman, and I asked him, like, how do you organize your day? Like, how do you manage, just daily routine? He goes, I start my day after Fajr. By Dhuhr, I'm done. I'm like, I was blown away because he's a person in multiple industries, many companies. And from a hustle culture perspective, it sounds like, wait, you're talking about like a 6-hour workday? Like, doesn't sound right. But he said the barakah of the day. And this comes down to, again, how do you organize ourselves, our schools, even Muslim majority countries? Yeah. I don't understand how we've adopted in the 9 to 5. It's like we've taken a factory system and then we kind of made that our way, how we organize our days. Imagine if schools and work started like after Fajr, after sunrise, and by Dhuhr you're done, which makes a lot of sense. A lot of spaces are very hot anyway, so you want to be home at Dhuhr, take a nap. This idea of naps are like what do you mean? That sounds like very anti-hustle culture. But there's study after study of the importance of napping. Our Prophet Muhammad himself took a time to nap. Like, he would not do anything that is extra or luxury, but he took time to nap, which again tells you there's a more human, more fitra, more natural way of being productive than this, hustle culture drive that is just not sustainable, that causes burnout. And we saw during COVID, how many people are realizing, whoa, now they realize how they're, when they, that what the hustle culture they're living in, like, doesn't make sense. But sadly, even now post-COVID, we're still seeing people sliding back into hustle culture because it's the default. Unless I have a different system of being productive, that seems the most safer thing to do. I get value, I get meaning, I get purpose. I'm a workaholic because what else would I do? Sitting in the masjid and doing adhkar, it sounds like a, waste of time. I need to be doing something versus being present and being abd of Allah.
That's really fascinating. I mean, my head of research, Tasneem, asked me yesterday to do an interview at 6 a.m. in the morning, and I declined. So you're saying that maybe I should be thinking
That'll be a very special interview with you. The Barakah. I would sign up for that one.
SubhanAllah. I'm still on my first coffee at 6 a.m. in the morning, if I'm right. SubhanAllah. So this is fascinating. But again, there may be some cynics who listen to all of this, who say, but you're calling for a race to the bottom. The Muslim world is declined. We're scientifically, industrially backward. We just don't have the industries. We're behind on the AI revolution. We've been, for the last 100, 200 years, we've really been playing catch up. Is this the right time?
Yes, to bring all these concepts.
To talk about barakah as opposed to time. How would you tie the conversation in about just the parlor state maybe that we're in, versus your mindset, the mindset shift that you actually require, you that we all require in order to recalibrate the way we view our lives.
And again, as I talk about, we're here for a purpose to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we know, and this is one of the drivers when I did Product Muslim, was Islam has to give us a way of being productive that is grounded in the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If it's not, then something is off there. So as Muslims, if I know my primary purpose to worship Allah, and worship I mean in a broadest sense, including doing meaningful work, including working on being at the, advancing in knowledge and advancing in learning. But it's framed under this notion, I'm an abd of Allah, I'm here to serve Allah and serve His creation. When I start from that premise, then okay, how do I start my day? I start my day at Fajr. I don't have to wait till 9 o'clock. In fact, I'm very productive. Usually by then 10, 11, most of my most important work is done. I'm more present, right? I'm more focused. Right now, we live in an age where people are losing their focus. The fact that Islam trains us to focus, whether it's focusing on, and not just any focus, a deep focus. The book by Cal Newport, Deep Focus, there's a chapter there that talks about one of his friends who every day was very productive, spends an hour in the morning studying the Talmud. And that's his secret of having developed deep focus. Our muscles of focus have weakened. Well, our rituals actually help develop that. Again, I'm not saying turn salah into a hack, but the fact that we're praying 5 times a day, the fact that we study, deeply reflect on the Quran, these are all things that have impact. And the evidence of all of this is the Islamic civilization. If Islam did not lead to a success in all the fields of science and mathematics, they would have seen the evidence of that in the early ages. But for over 1,000 years, these were productive scholars. These were productive, people who oriented themselves to this way of life. They organized themselves around the prayer times. They organized themselves around Friday being an important day. They organized themselves with the Hijri calendar. It was a civilization. And I think we need to kind of orient ourselves to our civilization so we become, instead of trying to almost copy what others do, let's take on our civilization, include the way we do things. This is how we do things as Muslims. This is how we think, this is how we operate, how we wake up, what time we wake up, what time we sleep. If that becomes I feel like that should fuel the ummah, because now you're oriented towards this way of life, which is prophetic, which is aligned with how Allah wants us to live, and the barakah will come in our knowledge, in our industries. But we're trying to copy a model that doesn't fit us. It is not aligned to our natural way of living. We're burning out. We're going through hustle culture. We're just playing catch up versus almost redefine the space and how we do things on the terms how Allah taught us and the Prophet Muhammad taught us.
SubhanAllah, that's fascinating. You speak about, I think you wrote a paper where you talked about a father who turned his family's waiting time into Quran recitation time instead, to almost reduce the anxiety that's induced from waiting for someone or waiting in a queue or whatever it may be. Like, what type of thinking did this person have to go through in order to get to that stage where he's reading Quran, and what is he trying to do to his kids?
100%. It's interesting. I mean, I'm sure you all face this, and I have kids, and I know exactly. And they're like, let's go, and I need to use the bathroom. I need to put the shoes on, and it takes, okay, can I just help you put your shoes on? No, I can do it myself. And it takes like half an hour to put your shoes on. And you're like, come on. And then you feel this anxiety, and you feel like, wait, I remember, I won't forget this. One day I was walking my son, and we were going somewhere, and he wanted to stop and smell the flowers. And I was getting irritated. And I was like, why am I getting irritated? He just wanted to smell the flowers. He's being more present. And he just almost bothered me that, why am I being upset about a child taking time? But because, I'll be late for something, even though that thing was not that important. So I feel like sometimes when, I think this father who I was reading the story about, he realized that it was almost like the time pressure was souring his relationship with his wife, with his kids. And he goes, well, how do I shift? How can I make, yes, I'll be like, all right, guys, we got to go. And I know it'll take at least half an hour for them to get out the door. So instead of me just being huffing and puffing and getting upset and yelling, let me read the Quran. So he was just sit at the staircase while everyone's getting ready and finding their jackets and putting their shoes on and getting in the car, and he read the Quran. And his wife later on said that just the kids observing that, hey, dad is calm. He's not shouting, he's not yelling, he's not getting upset. He gets in the car in a much more present mood. Like that's something, something shifted in the family, in the again, the barakah that led, where a situation could have been stressful and toxic and being upset, it turned to a barakah moment of presence and being there. So it's something that honestly I was so, when I saw that, I was like, I need to practice as well. Because again, it's natural. You want to be doing something, but realizing, wait, I need to be here. And these moments, how long will you have those moments with your kids? And these moments are very special. So instead of letting shaitan play the agitator, as we call it, shaitan, let the Quran be the calmer and bring barakah in your home, inshallah.
Mohammed Faris, earlier on, you talked about how we need to design our day around the prayer times. I've never really thought about it like that, because we design our prayers around the prayer times. And of course, our prayer times are determined by the position of the sun. SubhanAllah, we're overlooking the Marmara Sea, and at the moment, we're slowly moving towards sunset. And so we know that Maghrib time is coming up. Now, it seems like you're making a more profound point. You're saying, well, it's not just Maghrib that should be resonating or connected with the sun declining, but there's actually our life's rhythm should be around our salah and around the position of the sun. Explain that
100%.
to me, please.
This is the most fascinating thing about salah and the daily prayers, because it syncs us with Allah's creation, right? The clock removes that. And subhanAllah, our bio clocks, right? We have every cell in our body has this sort of clock inside of it, a biological clock that shifts with the seasons, shifts the sun. And salah naturally helps us align with that.
Really?
When you wake up early in the morning, right? What kicks in the cortisol to kind of wake you up? It's like with seeing the sunlight. That's why it's so important to see the sunlight in the morning. When you're getting the UV lights in the dhuhr time, maghrib, when you see the sun setting, the melatonin starts getting released. So we are created Allah's creation, and He's syncing us in nature. And salah is those markers for that day. So it's when we lose that, when we are just trying to fit salah into our day, or fit salah according to a certain clock movement, we lose that connection with nature. We make that disconnect between our biology and our circadian rhythm and Allah's creation. Another thing, people get upset about, oh man, prayer times keeps changing in the summer and the winter. I'm like, that is Allah's training you. The fact when it gets early in the summer a little bit and gets later in the winter, that's almost like you're syncing with Allah's creation. You're becoming more human as part of this oneness of Allah's creation, versus again a machine that's disconnected from nature. And even like, for example, productivity perspective, right? Being productive. Oh, the point was jet lag. I always tell people, if you want to overcome jet lag.
It's probably the jet lag that made you.
That's it.
It's
like, the best hack I found for jet lag is to pray on time.
Really?
That's especially Fajr, and get that morning sunlight. And again, as a hack, always people say, see the morning sunlight. First, if you see the morning sunlight, it's telling your brain, hey, it's morning time. When you see the evening sunset, you're saying it's nighttime. So one of the best hacks to sync, and the second best hack is actually grounding, which is to walk either barefoot or even better, doing sujood on like, that's why if you ever get a beach, if you're on a beach, something, go actually pray on grass, on beach. That tells the body where we are in this planet. These are fascinating things that we've lost there because we just trying to fit salah into our schedule as if it's like like a break for something.
So if I've got you right, in effect, where it's not that our days are designed and salah sort of fits neatly into those days. Your basic argument is that our day should fit around our salah, and we've got to almost determine the activities we do based on the salah that we've just read, we've just prayed, and the salah that's coming up.
Yes, one of the things that I've, alhamdulillah, over the years kind of tried to study was what is the routine of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Because I was just fascinating, in 23 years, he changed it. And then we all get obsessed with productive people. Oh, what time did so-and-so wake up? What time so-and-so ate? And I look at his daily routine and realize, wait a second, his daily routine is actually the 5 daily prayers are the anchors, and it's what he does before and after, right? And the whole day. So if you're trying to follow a prophetic routine, and we say he's our best example, including how we organize ourselves, then he's giving us the roadmap. Organize yourself. So even nowadays, alhamdulillah, I've seen some brothers and sisters coming up with journals, which we have prayer time as almost the anchors, and you kind of put activities for the day.
Yeah.
So when I plan my day, okay, Fajr, okay, post Fajr this, until even up at Duha, for example, is like mid-morning break, and then another time, and then I'll have a nap maybe, and there's Dhuhr, and you always think of Salah time as the main anchor of your day, versus the other way around.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, so this is really the psychology of life is we need to change the way we view life, completely. Capitalism runs on scarcity, it runs on competition. It's never been satisfied with what you have, so you're constantly seeking more and more acquisition, more and more material wealth in order to find that satisfaction. Barakah, you argue, runs on abundance and contentment. So you're pitting these two philosophies, really, one against the other. Capitalism and scarcity and competition and wants, and Barakah on abundance and contentment. Just explain that to me. What is it that you're attempting to do there?
If I know that only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the guarantee of my rizq, of my output, my outcome, my results in life. And it's from Him. And me as a slave of God, I need to orient myself towards Him, organize my day around Him, do my best for my work and my relationships, but knowing ultimately the results not from Him. Then again, back to the gardener metaphor, as I'm gardening, I'm not worried about the fruits. I know I'm going to garden, I'm going to work hard, I'm going to plant some seeds, I'm going to put blood, sweat, and tears and try this thing to grow. But at the end, the fruit is not up to me. And that gives a sense of contentment, a sense of presence. Versus if I'm obsessed about the fruit, I'm obsessed about the outcome, and I have this fixed image of success. Either I achieve this or I don't achieve this. If I don't achieve this, then I'm a failure. And then that's a very, very difficult way of living. I always think about Nuh alayhi salam, and he's given 1,000 years and 950 years spent in da'wah and calling his people, yet the results don't show for it. And think from a product, if you were to do it from a productivity assessment, right? If
he was not met his targets.
His targets. And, ma'adallah, you say that's a failure. But he's considered one of the ulul azm min rusul. Why? Because he put in the effort. He was sincere. He put everything in his can. And I know it's a very difficult thing to wrap your head around. I sometimes talk to our CEOs. They're like, this whole gardener mindset, like, what do I do with sales targets? I have targets, I have financial goals. I'm like, yes, you can always have a direction where you're heading. You need some kind of, okay, this is what I'm going to work towards. But instead of being outcome-based, you're more process-driven. For example, I have a sales guy on my team, and I always tell him, I'm not going to hold you accountable for the sales target, but I hold you accountable on how many calls you had per day and what's the quality of those calls. So I'm more process-driven versus achievement-focused. So, and I think if you think hand on heart, oh Allah, I did my best today. I might not achieve my results or the outcome, but I've done my best today. But subhanAllah, there was a funeral today, or someone called me, this happened. They're more present, more there. And sometimes things just work out in ways we cannot explain. And you look back and thinking, how did all this was achieved? I didn't even plan for this even. There's this Barakah Effect that came in my life. And that's what we wanted people to tap into. Versus this always this sense of lack of contentment, scarcity, there's not enough, versus abundance mindset, there's enough, right? And I think it's a different way of living, experiencing life, especially when it comes to work, which sometimes people feel uncomfortable because, how do you define enough, and what about others, and like this competitive field we're in, and it challenges. We have to almost reorient ourselves how we approach work and approach competition and approach business. I was talking to somebody yesterday. He goes, wait a second, the purpose of business is to make money. You're saying what? Like, I don't get, what's the alternative? If it's not making, what's the alternative? And I said, well, that's a great question, because as a Muslim ummah, have we defined what a corporation is? What's the purpose of corporation? And if we're saying the purpose of human beings to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what if we extend that definition, and the purpose of a corporation is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What would that look like? Now you're talking about things like amana, things like serving your customers, taking care of your employees. There are other metrics beyond the financials that a Muslim corporation should think about. But again, it's like, oh, but that's not how business is done. But I'm like, well, this is where we need to talk about decolonize our corporate cultures, because we need to start thinking about what is the purpose of a company? What is the purpose of being a listed company? What is the intention behind it? Versus simply, all right, I'm going to just take the same measurements, and then, of course, I have to follow the same systems to achieve the same goals, basically.
That's fascinating. Mohammed Faris, you're an entrepreneur. You've built a company, you sell products, you've run programs inside the same market economy that you're critiquing. Like, how do you personally hold that tension without it turning into like a feeling of hypocrisy?
Great question. And it's almost like I call coming back to the intention and the how. The why and the how. So talking to you, what's our intention for this business? We have a business, we're for profit, we're doing training and coaching for individuals and corporations. What's the intention behind it, right? We have a high intention of spreading Barakah culture. We want to tell people a different way of living. That's our intention. Okay. How are we going to go about delivering this? What are the different mechanisms? And sometimes when the how, especially I can't talk about the mindsets, the values, and the rituals. The mindsets is the how we approach it. For example, being akhirah focused. So one of the questions we ask before we launch a program saying, if I were to stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala today, will I be happy about this program I'm delivering or not? Another is value. For example, value justice. A simple business practice. For example, we have a program, some people offer installment plans. And the question now is, normally in the training or in just online courses, you charge more for installment plan. And I was telling my team, that doesn't sound right. We are charging people more who couldn't afford to pay cash up front. That doesn't sound right. So no, this should be the same payment plan. Whether you pay in 6 months or in one lump sum, it should be the same. Now people are like, yeah, but that's not how the business world works. I'm like, that's a value we bring to the table. Offering scholarship, for example. And then the rituals. For example, praying istikhara before entering into working with a supplier. Paying your employees on time. Even simple things that started doing this where, again, talk about orienting ourselves, not just our day towards the prayer times, but the months. So paying my team based on the Hijri month, and which is great because they get a bonus every 2 years because the Hijri month is shorter. So that is the intention, the how, what differentiates it. And I think that's where we're navigating through that, inshallah.
Let's talk about the Hijri months because, I've always, maybe subconsciously, I've always felt that the Hijri calendar is fantastic, but it's really not practical because the Hijri calendar leaves a lot not to time, right? It's a little bit more opaque or at least vague when it comes, when is the 15th of Ramadan? We can't really tell when the 15th of Ramadan is until we see the sighting of the moon. And that's 15 days prior to the 15th of Ramadan. So how do we really, truly, practically today move towards a Hijri calendar in this sort of world where everything is really determined by the date of a contract, the date of a return of a loan, whatever it may be. These are dates in a calendar that, I've got dates in my calendar for next year that I've placed in my calendar. Wasn't the Hijri calendar just messed that up?
Beautiful. Again, think about for 1,300 years, the Muslim Ummah literally organized themselves on the Hijri calendar. If you look at all the old books, all the old contracts, court orders, they were all Hijri first. All the letters, everything was Hijri first. So we ran on this system. It's not a system we're just inventing. We ran the system. And I talk about this, again, if you're trying to orient yourself complete as Abd of Allah, then the first thing you do, well, what is the calendar, what calendar Allah chose for us? You know, Allah says in the Quran, "Inna iddat ash-shuhuri 'inda Allah 12 shahra." The months of Allah, the 12, you know, the months of Allah, the 12 months, minha arba'atun hurum, 4 of them are sacred, right? So He defined, this is the months that He wants us to, this is His calendar. And calendar very, I got fast my calendar, realized it's such a subtle thing. It organizes society.
Yeah.
That's why the Roman emperors were kind of fighting over it. You know, Gregorian and Julian, all that stuff, because they realized whoever controls the calendar controls your life.
Right.
But on a more practical basis, I always tell people there's 3 layers. We need to first recognize its importance. And that means raise awareness about it. So we talk about just put the Hijri on your phone. So, you know, turn on your phone. There's, alhamdulillah, all the major sort of iOSs have the Hijri calendar.
Right.
Put that on. So at least you have it on your screen. Number 2, that's the first, being aware of the month, being aware of the day. Sometimes it's sad to ask, which year are we in? People don't know 1448.
Yeah.
Right? So just being aware of that.
Yeah.
The second one is align. Align means how do I align my sort of, for example, when I plan, right? So one thing we did as a company, we actually aligned our annual planning by the Hijri. So we just had like a 2-week in Muharram, a 2-week retreat for the team.
Right.
What is our Hijri plan? Was Muharram, Safar, Bi'al Awwal, Bi'al Thani. And it just gives a whole different, almost like feel, because now we have this, we're aware of sacred time and non-sacred time, right? Muharram is now here. Today is 29th of Muharram. Safar is about to start, Rabi' al-Awwal is coming, and Rajab. So almost even when how you design your program, design when you do things, and it's fascinating. Ramadan is scheduled Eid holidays and Ramadan holidays. People like gets caught up by, oh, Ramadan, I didn't know it's coming, because they're completely unaware of the Hijri calendar.
Yeah.
And the third is adoption. Adoption is where now we're, even for simple things like in your communications, we now, for example, on our website, if you notice all the articles, we put the Hijri first, example. Telling people which date we're gonna, which the cohorts. So even small things like this is a step towards that. And I think, you know, it's really sad. You know, even simple things. Also, calculate your Hijri birthday, right? A lot of I joke with my friends who say when they post something that, alhamdulillah, I've turned 40. I'm like, actually, you're 42. Like, no, what do you do? I'm like, Hijri. And even the seerah, like we think of seerah in terms of Gregorian, but actually, how many years Prophet Muhammad lived? He says 63 years. Is that Hijri or Gregorian? Like, oh, actually, no, Hijri. You know, things like Allah says when you reach 40 years of age, He's referring to the Hijri. So it is a complete time system. We have on a daily basis the salah, on a weekly basis Fridays, on a monthly basis and annual basis is the Hijri calendar. And I think of Umar al-Khattab, the genius who, he could have chosen the Roman calendar. Why did he insist on starting a new, that's a very bold move.
That's right.
I want to start a new calendar because it's civilization identity. He didn't want us to be dissolved and lose ourselves. So I'm a big proponent of the Hijri, and I really call people to take Hijri seriously and to start thinking, even in small ways, because we need to make it part of our lives instead of forgetting about it.
Yeah, we don't take it seriously. You're completely right. I mean, I remember there was an app or a website that I was able to track back when I was born. And I was chuffed to know that it was the first of Ramadan, according to this website. So mashallah, maybe. But you're right, I can't actually remember the year I was born now in Hijri. I mean, I knew it from the website, but I haven't memorized it. But I know the year in the Gregorian calendar. So I think you're absolutely right. But then where's the resistance? I mean, do you feel that, because there must be resistance, people are set now in the Gregorian calendar and, thinking about the days in opposition to how you describe how we should think about the days. So, you must have met a lot of opposition. You deal with lots of CEOs and entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Have you managed to convince any of them of this?
Yeah. The ones that are easy to convince are those that it makes sense for them. Because a lot of Muslim charity organizations, for example, realize it makes sense for them to allow Hijri because even the fundraising plan works on that. But the resistance always comes down to what you mentioned at the beginning of, it's not practical.
Yeah.
Right? Also, things like, for example, it might be 15th Rajab here, but it might be 16th Rajab there because of different moon sighting, and we have all the moon sighting debates.
Yeah.
But those are things that we can solve.
Yeah.
I mean, can you just imagine now with AI, hey, let's say I say I'm going to schedule a meeting with you 15th Rajab.
Yeah.
And AI knows what is 15th Rajab for you and for me, and it kind of syncs in, makes sure we appear on the same date. It is doable. Sometimes we have this almost like lack of imagination of what would it look like. I tell people, imagine if we had the caliphate come back today and they decide to continue working Gregorian calendar. I'm like, we're still colonized.
Yeah.
But what would it look like to establish a calendar system that we take seriously? And to be honest, if you look at the 57 Muslim countries, I was tracking some of the countries, when did they let go of the Hijri calendar? For example, I know in Egypt it was like 1857, and the reason for that was when the French and the English, they wanted Egypt was under a lot of debt, and they had to pay back in Gregorian, and they had to change the entire banking system. But until 1850 something, it was actually Hijri. And one of the last countries, I think Saudi Arabia, was 2016, switched from Hijri to Gregorian because also for austerity measures, because hey, that actually will save us 1 month of payroll. And there's all this, but it was like, we need to reclaim it back because there is some political will that is needed. But also I feel like if as individuals, if we talk Hijri, discuss Hijri, celebrate birthdays in Hijri, everything goes Hijri, I can see it being a lived experience that you realize, wow, like I now feel I enter a sacred, what is a sacred month? Imagine going to Mecca. We all get, it's Mecca, I'm not going to commit a sin, it's just like a special place. Well, we should have the exact same experience with time, a sacred month. This is Muharram. That means I should be really careful with my sins and should try my best, my good deeds. But we lost that because we just follow this flat calendar that is honestly organized around, again, capitalism. Think about the holidays, back to school, Thanksgiving in the US, Christmas, New Year's, Valentine's Day, and it's all about shopping events versus spiritual events like Muharram, Rajab, Dhul Qa'dah, Dhul Hijjah, Rabi' al-Awwal. Like these are all, they have depth and meaning and spirituality that we lose when we don't plan and even the other one, when you look at the moon, and it's a new month, and there's that dua you say at the beginning of the month, the hope you get. January 1st, so what? February 1st, okay. It doesn't mean anything. But when I look in the new moon, and one person, I think there was a lady who's an anthropologist, says that the Hijri calendar is the most democratized calendar, because in the past, before phones, before you had your calendar on your phone, you had to go ask the priest or ask the merchant what date it is. But here, with the Hijri calendar, the Bedouin in the desert can look up and go, it's end of Muharram. And a city dweller. SubhanAllah, I met a farmer, a Sudanese farmer. He does not know Gregorian. I was so impressed. Like he just does not know Gregorian. He looks up, he knows the exact date. We lost the science of looking at this moon and telling the date based on the moon. I think it's something that we need to reclaim. And again, and think of the theme, salah, we connect with nature, the 5 daily prayers with the sun movement, the Hijri with the moon. And that's why Allah talks about, look at the sun, look at the moon. He's trying to connect us back to Him. But we're kind of putting ourselves in this industrial machine box, and we're losing that along the way.
So, you're making a really profound point here. You're almost arguing that it's not just the way we should live as Muslims, it's almost in tune with our biology, our fitrah. We have this human nature, and the way in which we're living at this moment under this capitalist, monstrosity maybe, is that we're almost contorting our lives to fit something which doesn't quite fit our biology. So a return back to the Hijri calendar, a return back to having salah as the sort of the pinnacle, the anchors in your day, that almost like creates a better way of living. That's how what you
the healthier, better, peaceful, more barakah. Like it sinks, and that's why a lot of people struggle. People struggle with their prayers or struggle with practicing Islam, because we're almost trying to fit Islam into what we have, and it doesn't fit. It just doesn't fit. You almost have to rethink everything. Versus think, okay, well, I know it's hard, but that's part of being a slave of God. It means La ilaha illallah. I'm not worshipping except Allah. That's part of what we need to do, including how we organize ourselves and our days and our weeks and our months, inshallah.
So we're here at the Prophetic Strategy Summit. Alhamdulillah, we're surrounded by very talented people, professionals, entrepreneurs, people who run NGOs. So these are very productive people in every sense. Talented, mashallah, they're trying to do something good for themselves and the ummah. If they were to embrace holistically this way of living, what would their day and their month and their year look like, as opposed to maybe what it's looking like now?
SubhanAllah, again, one of the things that came on the theme in the Prophetic Summit is the importance of, especially people who are activists, people who are doing work for the ummah, is just to ground themselves in these rituals, right? Sometimes we get so busy with our activist work that we neglect prayers or we forget prayers. So there's a lot of emphasis by the scholars, may Allah bless them, to get up for tahajjud, a lot of emphasis to read some Quran. Don't be The person who neglects the Quran in the name of being productive, in the name of being, I'm serving the ummah, but I'm not building my spiritual capacity. When Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was first called to call towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he was asked to get up and pray tahajjud, for example. So establishing the rituals as almost like I tell them it's to give you a spiritual capacity to handle the responsibility you're going to do, right? We're weak as human beings, and without Allah's help, without the madad from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's help, we'd be squashed, right? And whether it's internally through lack of sincerity or externally through criticism and attacks. So we need to build a spiritual capacity. And that comes from I start my day with at least fajr, if not with tahajjud. I do my adhkar, morning adhkar, which is so powerful. People talk about affirmations and standing from the mirror and saying, I'm beautiful. It's like, just get up and remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Do people do that?
You'd be surprised.
Really?
If you look at productivity stuff, like, you're confident and all like power moves. I'm like, do your adhkar. Yeah. Turn towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Read some Quran. Put the barakah of the Quran. Start your day with what I call an intentions list. What's my intention for today?
Yes.
So what am I to do for today? And then again, pray duha prayer. This idea of duha prayer, I think it's a perfect mid-morning break.
Yeah.
Right? Think about, people think I like the coffee break. I'm like, take a mid-morning duha break. Pray duha prayers. It's a great time to also pray istikhara as well. Again, we face so many decisions in our day. Why not ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah, I need help. I don't know what to do. So build istikhara in your workday. Dhuhr time comes, taking a nap like the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ took. Like a short one, not asking you to take a 2-hour nap, take like a 10, 20-minute nap. Rejuvenate yourself. Pray dhuhr. Try to aim to finish things by asr, right? And then you go home. And even one of the prophetic routine example, after asr was actually known as almost like family time for the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Praying maghrib, having early dinner before maghrib.
Yes.
Praying after maghrib, of course, spending call time with the family, then sleeping early after Isha. Again, we talk about sleep health. People really, unfortunately, it's really sad that in the Muslim world, like the times are upside down. People sleep late. It impacts their fajr, impacts their tahajjud, impacts their productivity. But the sunnah is to sleep after Isha, like the Prophet Muhammad followed us. So that would be a typical day. And in a week where the Friday is honored, right? Nowadays, Friday is part of your work day, and you're like, I gotta quickly go pray and come out. I'm like, the Friday is the Sayyidul Ayyam, the master of the week.
Yeah.
Give it its honor, prepare for it early. So that kind of centers you on a weekly basis. And then a monthly basis, again, with the Hijri calendar. So it's a time orientation that needs to be happening from the ground up, and especially those who are in this field, who are activists, who are doing stuff for the ummah. I feel like it will feel like a disconnect for them to try to adopt hustle culture, models of productivity, to try to serve Islam. You either burn out, which I get a lot of cases of people burning out,
Right.
or they'll just, it can't sustain for the long term because it's not sustainable. It's very hard to sustain.
Mohammed Faris, this has really been a fascinating conversation. I've really loved every minute of it, and I need to change. I've realized I've got to completely recalibrate the way I sort of view my life, because it is true. We wake up and we check the phone before anything, and we're always, the phone. It's not just tyranny of time; it's the tyranny of your mobile phone. I mean, maybe that's a final question to talk about. I'm probably more and more convinced that we need to be less on our phones, and we need to think about establishing real relationships with people rather than connecting constantly online. Is that something that you see in your work and your coaching?
One of the biggest challenges to focus management, and again, one of pillars of productivity, energy, focus, and time. The biggest challenge to focus now is phones.
Yeah.
And when I ask people, why do you think we're so addicted to our phones?
Yeah.
And they don't realize how much the phones are designed to be distracting.
Yeah.
Peter Gould, whom we had on the show, talks about the the technology designed for distraction, designed for remembrance, right? Every color, every icon is used to design for distraction. So the question now is like, how do I use this technology, not begin to be my master? And honestly speaking, I know some of my techniques might be radical for some people, but it's the only way I found. I know my nafs is weak. I tell people, hey, I'm weak. I know I cannot handle this, so I need to put guardrails.
Yeah.
So one thing I do, I use a device called the brick device, which basically bricks your phone, and I put it on schedule automatically. At 10 p.m. it bricks my phone. I cannot access my phone till the morning, till after Fajr. So even if I wake up in the morning, if I'm tempted to check, it's not there. Right. My phone is bricked.
Yeah.
I put my phone sometimes, if I'm really distracted by it, I put on grayscale mode. It makes it super unattractive.
Really?
Great tip with the kids as well. The kids will not play with it if they saw gray. Oh, this is not this boring.
Yes.
Deleting social media off your phones, which is like, what? Sometimes I do this in workshop and everyone's like panicking. It's like as if I asked them to do something. But get it off your phone, because don't think, oh, I'll have willpower. Why do you have to test your willpower every day? We have much more important things to put our willpower towards instead of being so trying to say, oh, should I check it? Not check it, not check it. So these social media on your phone and putting those guardrails, and then again, back to the idea, what's my niyyah? If you find yourself, into your phone and you lost like half an hour, even seeking istighfar, Allah forgive me. I spent this last half an hour just checking reels.
Yeah.
Is that you should almost just sense that this minute is wasted. One of the things that I talk about, the weight of time, where if the next 30 seconds we decide to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, these 30 seconds will weigh heavy on the Day of Judgment compared to us just sitting there and checking our phone.
Yeah.
And Allah talks about فَأَمَّا مَنْ ثَقُلَتْ مَوَازِينُهُ, whoever's scale is heavy, he's the one who's going to win. So we should try to make our time heavy through remembrance, through the rituals, through the adhkar, through their intentions, and not make it light and almost like no weight with it. We're just checking our phones. Allahu Alam, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair. I'm really, as I said, it's been a wonderful conversation today. And Mohammed Faris is the author of The Barakah Effect. I mean, how long did it take you to write this book?
It took about almost 5 years. Alhamdulillah.
5 years.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Not all very productive, I'll be honest. Starts and stops. So long though.
Stops. Alhamdulillah. Well, it's I haven't actually. Alhamdulillah. Now I have this book which you've gifted to me very kindly. I will read it. But many people speak very highly of this book. So Jazakallah khair for your time. And how do our viewers get in contact with you if they need your help?
Sure. Just check out productiveness.com. And I send a newsletter every Thursday, just sharing my thoughts on faith, spirituality, and productivity. Alhamdulillah.
Well, Jazakallah khair for your time. And it's nearly time for Maghrib, so we should...
Beautiful.
We should, but thank you so much.
Barakallah fiqh. Assalamu
alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. Now you've reached the end of this show, and the fact that you've stayed until the very end tells me that you truly believe in our work. Please consider making a one-off donation or becoming a member by visiting thinkingmuslim.com/membership. Now, your contributions give you exclusive behind-the-scenes access and the ability to ask questions to our guests, and monthly calls with myself, my team, and our guests like Sami Hamdi. Jazakallah khair, and keep us in your du'as.